Red corner, wearing black with fuchsia and red trim. When he stepped on the scale, he weighed in at an official 145 and 1/2 pounds. Started from the bottom now. He enters the ring, an undefeated 3-division pound-for-pound king with 33 victories, 24 of those victories coming by way of KO. The former lightweight, former undisputed super lightweight, and tonight making the first defense of his WBO welterweight championship of the world. Born, bred, and repping Omaha, Nebraska, Terence Crawford.
Canelo Alvarez has not faced as educated.
Trying to come with a left uppercut.
See him lay on that left side.
Punching between punches and a flush.
We'll try to hurt him here.
Another big right hand by Canelo. The right hand lead against.
A super fight between Saul Canelo Alvarez and Terence Bud Crawford sounds like a boxing fan's ultimate dream, and for now, that's all it is. After 3 days of chaos, walkbacks, swirling rumors, and secretive phone calls behind the scenes, the targeted September 13th showdown at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas remains unconfirmed. But if both fighters put pen to paper in the coming weeks, this wouldn't just be one of the biggest fights of 2025, it could also be the most fragile blockbuster since Mayweather vs. Pacquiao. Here's the full story so far, and 5 huge concerns fans and insiders are already whispering about. Before we dive in, do me a quick favor, hit the like button and subscribe. 98% of you watch without subscribing, and it seriously helps us grow. Done? Awesome. Let's jump right in. First things first, before Canelo Alvarez can even think about facing Terence Crawford at Allegiant Stadium, he has a very real, and very dangerous, obstacle standing in his way: his upcoming May clash against undefeated IBF super middleweight champion William Skull. On paper, it's being sold as a typical Cinco de Mayo tune-up fight. But behind the scenes? It's anything but routine. Skull may not be a household name outside hardcore boxing circles, but don't get it twisted, he's no easy target. The Cuban-born German fighter is coming off a brutal win over Vladimir Siskin and currently holds the very IBF title Canelo once vacated while chasing bigger paydays against Edgar Berlingo. Skull is hungry, active, and riding major momentum. And facing a superstar like Canelo? That's just extra fuel for the fire. What was supposed to be a stay-busy fight has suddenly turned into a high-risk, high-pressure nightmare. And here's where it gets really tricky: Canelo needs this belt back. Reclaiming the IBF title would officially restore his status as the undisputed king at 168 pounds, making the Crawford superlight even more historic. But boxing never sticks to the script. If the Skull fight turns into a war, if Canelo suffers a bad cut, a hand injury, or even a controversial decision loss, everything lined up for September could collapse like a house of cards. At this stage of Canelo's career, every grueling battle takes a toll that recovery alone can't erase. And don't forget the politics: Skull is a mandatory challenger, and the sanctioning bodies won't tolerate shortcuts. If Canelo struggles or gets hurt, negotiations with Crawford could stall, shift, or flat-out fall apart. This isn't just a fight. It's a tightrope walk that could make or break a $150 million mega event. One wrong move in May, and the superlight vanishes overnight. Now, what about Terence "Bud" Crawford? For all his brilliance, the surgical accuracy, the switch-hitting wizardry, the mental domination, time is not on his side. Since 2020, Crawford has averaged just 1 fight per year. That's less about his skills and more about boxing's broken politics. But here's the uncomfortable truth: it's not just politics holding him back. It's also choices he made. While his victories, especially the masterclass demolition of Errol Spence Jr., were absolutely emphatic, the growing gaps between fights are getting louder and harder to ignore. And now at 37 years old, Crawford is older than Canelo, less active, and heading into completely uncharted physical territory. after briefly touching 154 pounds, but is now preparing to leap straight to 168, a division where punches are harder, clinches are heavier, and punishment is absorbed very differently. This isn't just about moving up 2 weight classes, it's about defying biology itself. Fighters almost never skip an entire division successfully, especially not in their late 30s when reflexes slow down and recovery becomes harder. Even with a long training camp, it's not just about adding muscle. It's about rebuilding a body that dominated on speed, reflexes, and razor-sharp timing. At 168, the punches don't just come slower, they land way heavier. The real question, will Bud still be the counter-punching genius at 168 that he was at 147? Or will the added weight dull his reactions just enough for Canelo to find his target? And then there's the issue of ring rust. Boxers live and die by rhythm. Time out of the ring doesn't just kill conditioning, it dulls awareness, timing, and that sixth sense that elite fighters rely on. Crawford's instincts are among the sharpest ever seen, but instincts fade without sharpening. Jumping into the biggest fight of your life after a long layoff? That's a huge gamble, even for a legend. Crawford has made a career out of defying odds, beating the politics, silencing doubters, and making champions look ordinary. But this next leap? It's not just historic. It's almost unprecedented in modern boxing history. Without even a warm-up fight at super middleweight, he's diving straight into the fire. The real question isn't if Terence Crawford is still great. It's whether greatness can survive the weight. Now, let's strip away the promotional hype and ask the uncomfortable question, why now? For years, Canelo Alvarez refused to entertain a fight with Terence Crawford, citing the obvious, the massive size difference. He has everything to gain and nothing to lose, Canelo said back in 2023. What changed? 2 words, Turkic Alalshik. The Saudi advisor and combat sports powerhouse behind Riyadh season has completely flipped the boxing world upside down, offering blank checks to make dream fights happen. Reports say Canelo was offered around $150 million for this fight, a number so huge even a generationally wealthy fighter had to pay attention. When you're offered more for one night than you made over multiple title defenses combined. Even the proudest champions listen. But the money is only part of the equation. Quietly, Canelo is playing a much bigger game. He's not just boxing's biggest attraction, he's positioning himself to become boxing's next true mogul. His promotional efforts are already growing, managing rising stars like Teofimo Lopez and even his former opponent Jamie Munguia. He's not just chasing belts anymore, he's chasing control. A win over Crawford wouldn't just silence critics or add another jewel to his crown. It would boost his value as a promoter, brand, and industry power broker massively. It's the Oscar de la Hoya blueprint all over again. Use the final years of your fighting career to build an empire. So while the public sees Canelo versus Crawford as a superlight for legacy, the deeper truth might be this: is it really about proving something inside the ring, or about building something far bigger outside of it? At his peak at 147 pounds, Terence Crawford looked almost untouchable, slicing through champions, switching stances mid-fight, dismantling the best fighters of his era with clinical precision. But when he briefly moved up to 154 pounds, that aura of invincibility didn't disappear, but it definitely shifted. He was still dominant. Still brilliant. But the physical margin for error? Noticeably thinner. And now? He's attempting something boxing has rarely, if ever, seen: direct leap into the fire form 147. All the way to 168. A super fight between Saul Canelo Alvarez and Terence "Bud" Crawford sounds like every boxing fan's dream, and for now, that's exactly what it is. After 3 days of chaos, rumors, backtracking, and hushed calls behind the scenes, the targeted September 13th clash at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas remains unconfirmed. But if both fighters sign on the dotted line soon, this would just be one of the biggest fights of 2025. It could also become one of the most fragile blockbusters since Mayweather vs. Pacquiao. Here's the full story so far, and 5 major concerns fans and insiders are already whispering about. But before we dive in, do me a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe. 98% of you watch without subscribing, and it seriously helps the channel grow. Done? Good. Now, let's get into it. First, Canelo Alvarez has unfinished business before he can even think about Crawford and Allegiant Stadium. Standing in his way, undefeated IBF super middleweight champion William Skull. On paper, it's being sold as a routine Cinco de Mayo showcase, but behind the scenes, it's anything but routine. Skull isn't a household name outside hardcore boxing circles, but don't let that fool you. He's coming off a brutal win over Vladimir Siskin and now holds the IBF belt Canelo once vacated to chase bigger fights. Skull is active, proven, and very dangerous. And facing a generational star like Canelo only fuels his hunger. Suddenly, what was supposed to be a stay-busy fight has turned into a high-risk, high-pressure situation. Here's why it matters: Canelo needs that IBF belt back. Reclaiming it would restore his undisputed status at 168 pounds, making the Crawford fight even more historic. But boxing rarely sticks to the script. If Canelo gets injured, cut, or suffers a controversial decision, the whole September plan could unravel. At this stage of his career, every brutal round leaves scars that even months of recovery can't erase. Plus, sanctioning bodies aren't exactly lenient when mandatory challenges are involved. A slip-up against Skull could stall, reshuffle, or even collapse negotiations with Crawford entirely. One wrong exchange in May, and a $150 million super light could vanish overnight. And what about Terence Crawford? For all his genius, the surgical precision, the switch-hitting brilliance, the mental dominance, time is not on his side. Since 2020, Crawford has averaged just one fight a year. At 37 years old, he's older than Canelo, less active, and stepping into completely uncharted physical territory. After briefly touching 154 pounds, Crawford is now attempting to leap directly to 168, bypassing an entire division, to face one of the most battle-tested, heavy-handed champions of this generation. Even Crawford himself has admitted the challenge. "I walk around heavier than people think," he once told Boxing Scene. But walking around at 170 pounds isn't the same as fighting 12 grueling rounds at 168, especially against someone who's lived and thrived in that division for over a decade. Crawford's greatness was never about brute strength. It's about razor-sharp timing, sudden rhythm shifts, and flawless balance. At super middleweight, punches come slower, but when they land like bricks. Clinches aren't just tactics, they are tests of brute force. The question now, can Crawford maintain his speed while adding size? Will his footwork suffer? Will his stamina survive the strain of a heavier, re-engineered body? The cautionary tale is real. Roy Jones Jr.'s legendary move to heavyweight earned him glory, but destroyed his body when he came back down. Jones was never the same. Could Crawford, at 37, be standing at the edge of a similar irreversible sacrifice, with no tune-up at 168, but is diving headfirst into the fire? No undo button. No second chances. This superlight might be a once-in-a-generation spectacle, but it's also causing a massive traffic jam across two entire weight classes. At 154 pounds, Crawford was just one win away from unifying the division. A showdown with WBC's WBO champ Sebastian Fundora was within reach, possibly followed by Borom Murtazaliev. Crawford could have made history as the first man to become undisputed in 3 weight classes in the 4-belt era. Now, that legacy-defining dream is on ice, maybe lost forever if the Canelo fight drags through the rest of 2025. And 168. Even messier. David Benavidez, perhaps the most avoided fighter in the division, has been waiting years for a Canelo shot. Rising stars like Diego Pacheco and Christian Billy are knocking at the door. Mandatory obligations like William Skull are stacking up. And if Dmitry Bicol beats Artur Beterbiev later this year, a rematch with Canelo at light heavyweight could be back on the table. In short, if anything delays or derails Canelo versus Crawford, an injury, a bad decision, or just boxing's normal chaos, 2 full divisions and half a dozen careers could be stuck in limbo for a year or more. It's the classic boxing paradox: to create one legendary moment, you might have to freeze an entire sport. Now, let's be real. Why is this fight even happening? For years, Canelo brushed off Crawford talk, citing the obvious, the size difference. He has everything to gain and nothing to lose, Canelo said in 2023. Translation, badbusiness.so. What changed? 2 words, Turki Alalshik, the Saudi sports power broker behind Riyadh season, didn't negotiate, he simply wrote a blank check. Reports say the offer to Canelo was around $150 million, too massive to ignore, even for a generationally wealthy fighter. Funny thing? That number wasn't supposed to be real. When Team Canelo floated that $150 million figure, it was meant to kill the fight, not make it happen. It was a financial firewall, a polite way to say, thanks, but no thanks. Then Alalshik called the bluff. And now? Canelo is about to get paid like it's peak Mayweather season. But here's the deeper play, Canelo isn't just fighting for legacy. He's positioning himself as boxing's next mogul. Already managing fighters like Teofimo Lopez and Jamie Munguia, Canelo's real endgame is control over his career, his brand, and the sport itself. A win over Crawford would skyrocket his leverage with networks, sponsors, and fighters alike. It's the De La Hoya Blueprint 2.0, use the final fighting years to build an empire. Meanwhile, the experts are split right down the middle. Mike Tyson says Canelo's size and strength will be too much, Crawford's great, but size matters in boxing. Shakur Stevenson believes Crawford's IQ will outsmart Canelo when it matters most. Teddy Atlas fears a brutal ending, similar to Kell Brook's ill-fated war against Golovkin. Andre Ward thinks Bud's movement could give Canelo nightmares. Roy Jones Jr. sees Canelo's relentless pressure eventually breaking Crawford down. When legends, across eras, styles, and divisions, are this divided, you know the fight is realists combustible. It's unpredictable. It's a clash of brilliance, power, timing, and risk, all happening at once. A superlight between Saul Canelo Alvarez and Terence Bud Crawford sounds like every boxing fan's dream, and for now, that's exactly what it is. After 3 days of chaos, rumors, backtracking, and hushed calls behind the scenes, the targeted September 13th clash at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas remains unconfirmed. But if both fighters sign on the dotted line soon, this wouldn't just be one of the biggest fights of 2025, it could also become one of the most fragile blockbusters since Mayweather vs. Pacquiao. Here's the full story so far, and 5 major concerns fans and insiders are already whispering about. But before we dive in, do me a quick favor, smash that like button and subscribe. 98% of you watch without subscribing, and it seriously helps the channel grow. Done? Good. Now, let's get into it. First, Canelo Alvarez has unfinished. No exhibitions. No YouTubers. No gimmicks. Just 2 all-time greats meeting at the absolute edge of their physical and mental limits. Greatness chasing greatness. Moments like this don't come around often. Now it's your turn. Who wins this fight? Is Canelo ducking? Or playing high stakes?